They fired me on a lie, just to replace me with the CFO's 21-year-old nephew who thought rebooting meant turning it off and on again. But when their entire company collapsed in 48 hours, guess who they called, begging for help? I didn't sabotage them. I just let their stupidity run exactly as I warned them. If you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or replaced by someone less qualified just because they were family, this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay until the end because what happens to this company is the most satisfying downfall you'll ever hear. The first time Harper Langley noticed the shift, it was subtle. Budget reports arrived later than usual, certain coworkers stopped replying to her emails, and the once welcoming atmosphere of the small medical supply company now had the chill of whispered conversations and closed-door meetings. Harper, the only remaining member of the old IT team, knew something was coming. The question was not if, but when. She wasn't new to corporate politics. At 38, Harper had seen enough reorgs and restructures to know the signs. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't just being phased out. She was being replaced, systemically. And the new CFO, Pam, freshly hired, painfully uninformed, and drunk on power, was making it clear. Pam waltzed into the company with the bravado of someone who'd never earned a role but had always been handed one. Her credentials were thin, her grasp on IT thinner, but her confidence? Unbreakable. Her motto echoed through the corridors like gospel: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Harper tried, at first, to work with her. Tried to explain why firewall licenses needed to be renewed, why aging servers were a liability, why ignoring updates was not cost-saving, but a direct path to operational collapse. But Pam had no interest in listening. Her eyes would glaze over, her mouth would curve into a patronizing smile, and her answer was always the same: we'll put it on the wish list. The wish list, Harper learned quickly, was a graveyard. No budget. No plan. No respect. What used to be a robust IT department had now been whittled down to Harper alone. She'd watched friends get fired one by one, each replacement suspiciously familiar, bridesmaids from Pam's wedding, college friends with padded resumes, even her personal hairdresser got a position as client wellness liaison. Titles were made up, salaries handed out, and competence was never a requirement. Yet Harper stayed. Not because she trusted the company, or believed she had a future there. But because jobs were scarce. The 2009 crash had tanked the job market, and in their small city, opportunities for someone with Harper's experience had dried up. She sent out resumes, made polite networking calls, kept her LinkedIn up to date, but nothing stuck. And so, each morning, Harper walked back into a place that felt less like a job and more like a betrayal waiting to happen. She knew she was a remnant, a reminder of the past administration Pam was so desperate to erase. A walking target. Each day felt like a countdown to the inevitable. The worst came during a quarterly all-hands meeting. Employees, tense from weeks of gossip and layoffs, dared to ask the owners about job security. The couple, smug, immaculately dressed, the husband sporting a Rolex that could pay for 3 employees' salaries, smiled indulgently and assured everyone, "Your jobs are safe. We're not laying anyone off." Harper had heard lies before, but this one came with the aftertaste of rot. The next morning, 6 people were laid off. No warning. No severance. Just cardboard boxes and you're no longer needed. And at noon, like a punchline delivered too soon, the owner drove into the parking lot in a brand new Escalade, its paint so shiny it reflected the sun into Harper's eyes. She watched from the break room window, a paper cup of stale coffee in her hand, and understood something then: they didn't care. Not about loyalty. Not about ethics. Not even about appearances. That's when she began documenting everything. She saved emails. Printed memos. Created backups of her scripts and workflows. Password-protected directories. She didn't plan revenge, not yet, but she planned survival. Then came the moment she dreaded, an HR meeting with Pam. Pam's voice was syrupy when she called Harper in. "Can we chat real quick?" she chirped. Harper's stomach sank. Real quick never meant good news. Inside the HR office, the air was heavy. A rep sat awkwardly in the corner, tapping a pen against her notepad. Pam sat across from Harper, her body language the practiced calm of someone rehearsing a scene. "We've received a report," she began. "Yesterday, you were seen accessing unauthorized files." Harper blinked. "What?" "That's not true." "I'm afraid it is. It's a serious violation. I was with Victor, the VP of Sales, all day yesterday, working on the new ordering system. He can verify that." Pam didn't blink. "This isn't about Victor. It's about you." HR nodded, robotically. "This is a disciplinary matter." Harper felt her pulse in her throat. A false charge. No evidence. No chance to defend herself. And the message was clear: you're out. The next day, it happened. She was greeted at her desk by a stranger. A tall, wiry kid wearing cargo shorts, sneakers too bright for an office, and a graphic t-shirt with a game controller on it. He introduced himself with a grin far too confident for someone so out of place. "Hey, I'm Tyler. Pam's nephew. I'm your new shadow." Harper nearly laughed. Of course. The final act of nepotism. But instead, she nodded, suppressing the growing nausea in her gut. "Right. Let's get started." Pam came by later with a forced smile. "Just have him shadow you for the day. He's evaluating our processes. Might streamline a few things." "Sure," Harper said coolly. "Just one thing." She turned to Tyler. "You'll need admin access." Pam's eyes narrowed. "Is that necessary?" "If he's evaluating our infrastructure, yes. Otherwise, he's just sightseeing." "Fine." And with that, the gates opened. Harper made a show of protesting. Loudly. "You know, it's highly irresponsible to give domain admin access to someone who isn't an employee." She looked Pam in the eye. "I'll have to change the password once he's done." Pam waved her off. "We trust him." "Of course," Harper said. "But I'll still walk him through password changes. We can't leave that open when he leaves." Tyler nodded as if he understood. He didn't. The rest of the day, Harper showed him only the basics. How to reboot servers. Where the shared drives lived. She let him touch things that didn't matter. The heart of the system, the scripts, the triggers, the fragile clockwork that made billing, inventory, and shipping work like magic, she left untouched. But she did show him how to change the domain admin password. Twice. Even had him write it down. That night, she went home. Packed her desk in her mind. And waited. The next morning, she was let go. Pam didn't even look her in the eye. "Tyler says your technical skills were lacking," she said flatly. "It's time to move on." Harper smiled. "Sure. Good luck." She walked out with her shoulders back, her pulse steady. She didn't need to burn the building down. The fire was already lit. Tyler sat at Harper's former desk, spinning slowly in her ergonomic chair like he was playing Office rather than working in one. He had a Mountain Dew beside the keyboard, Spotify open in a minimized browser tab, and no idea that the next few hours would haunt him for the rest of his life. To him, this was a formality. Aunt Pam had told him Harper was barely holding it together and technically outdated. Tyler figured he could just click around, Google a few things, and maybe watch a YouTube tutorial or two if something looked complicated. After all, he was the go-to-tech guy in his dorm back in college. He once installed a new router at his aunt's lake house. How hard could it be? The moment Harper's login expired, Tyler realized he hadn't written down her admin password correctly. He tried the version he scribbled in his notebook. Denied. He tried again, changing one letter to lowercase. Denied. He panicked. Sweat began to form under his arms. He remembered Harper making him change the domain admin password as a learning exercise. She stood over him, patient and firm, and even made him verify that he could do it. That password, the one that controlled every scheduled task on the server, the one that allowed full access to billing, inventory, order processing, and shipping, was now unknown. Tyler had changed it, but didn't remember what he changed it to. And no one else had access. The ripple effect was immediate. At 10:02 a.m., the inventory system failed to initialize. At 10:15 a.m., shipping froze. Labels didn't print. Orders weren't logged. At 10:47 a.m., billing stopped processing client invoices entirely. By noon, customer service lines were jammed with calls asking where shipments were, why payments hadn't been processed, and why recurring medical supply orders for hospitals were missing. Pam, who'd spent the morning smirking at her own success and brushing off questions about Harper's departure, was now red-faced and pale around the lips. Tyler locked himself in the server room trying to fix it. But the terminal was locked. Everything routed through scripts that required admin privileges. The documentation? Encrypted. The recovery credentials? Buried under layers of access he didn't even understand. Pam banged on the server room door at 1:15 p.m. "What is happening?" she demanded through the glass. "I'm working on it," Tyler croaked. But he wasn't. He was frozen, staring at a blinking cursor like it might magically type the solution for him. He had no idea how to reset a domain controller. No idea how to restore encrypted documentation from offline backups. No idea that the infrastructure Harper had built was precise, complex, and critically interdependent. At 3 p.m., the owners were called in. They didn't waste time with questions. They wanted results. Pam put on her best confident voice and declared that everything would be fine. Tyler just needed a few more hours. But Tyler, now hunched and pale, looked like he might throw up. By 5:30 p.m., orders had been missed, clients had threatened legal action, and an entire day's revenue was unrecoverable. Pam called Harper. Harper was at home. She had a glass of red wine in hand and her phone on silent, but she saw the missed call light up her screen like poetic justice. The next morning, she answered. "Harper," Pam said, voice high-pitched and fake sweet. "We were wondering if you'd be willing to come in. As a consultant, of course. To help us navigate a few temporary issues." Harper didn't even try to hide the smirk in her voice. "Oh. What sort of issues?" "Well, we just need you to walk Tyler through a few things. Nothing big. You fired me because he said my skills were lacking. Surely he can handle it." Pam paused. Then her tone shifted. "Harper, we'll pay you your regular salary." "I'm an independent contractor now," Harper replied. "If you want my help, I charge $200 per hour. With a 250-hour minimum." There was silence on the line. The kind that crackles with disbelief and desperation. "That's ridiculous." "No, what's ridiculous is hiring someone unqualified, giving them full access to a critical infrastructure they don't understand, and then firing the one person who built it." Pam's voice grew cold. "If you don't help us, we'll call the police." Harper leaned back in her chair, amused. "For what? For being fired? For following your orders? Please, call them. I'd love to explain how you gave your untrained nephew admin-level access without vetting him. Let's see how that goes over." There was a long, angry breath on the other end. Then, profanity. Then, a click. Pam hung up. Later that afternoon, Harper received a message from a former coworker, Victor, the VP of Sales. He texted her a simple update: "System's dead. Orders frozen." Billings down. You were right. Pam's losing it. Harper didn't reply. She didn't need to. The company brought in a real consultant 2 days later. Someone with credentials, experience, and, more importantly, no emotional attachment to fixing Pam's disaster. It took him nearly a week to undo the damage. He eventually recovered the backup documentation Harper had created, but even then, entire subsystems had to be rebuilt. The losses were significant. 3 major clients pulled their accounts. Refunds were issued. Several $100,000 in revenue disappeared into the chaos. Tyler was let go quietly. He disappeared from the office one afternoon and was never mentioned again. Pam, however, was harder to erase. Whispers spread. Executives began to ask why no protocols had been followed. Why someone without a degree or certification was granted domain admin access. Why Harper was fired on fabricated charges, and why the company had no backup plan. Within a month, Pam was gone. The official story was pursuing other opportunities. But everyone knew the truth. She had destroyed her own credibility. And Harper? Harper never returned their calls. She didn't have to. Her silence was the final statement. For the first time in nearly a decade, Harper Langley woke up with no alarms, no anxiety, and no unread emails threatening her existence. Her mind wasn't consumed by half-baked budgets or faulty directives from people who didn't know what a DNS server was. There was only quiet. Soft morning light spilled across her modest apartment, and Harper, wrapped in an oversized hoodie, stared at her ceiling with a strange mixture of peace and disbelief. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to Pam. Not to the smug owners. Not even to herself. But that didn't mean she wasn't watching. A former coworker, Tasha, who worked in logistics and had also survived the earlier layoffs, began sending Harper updates through encrypted email. She didn't call them updates, though. She called them episodes. Episode 3, CFO implodes at Monday's staff meeting. Episode 5, warehouse scanner failure sparks fistfight between shipping and receiving. Episode 6, Tyler's disappearance, no goodbye bagel run. Harper read them all over coffee with a growing sense of bittersweet satisfaction. She had never wanted to destroy the company. She just wanted dignity. A chance to be treated like her work meant something. Like she wasn't disposable. But they made a choice. Pam chose nepotism over competence. The owners chose lies over loyalty. Tyler chose bravado over humility. Harper had simply allowed the system to expose itself. And yet, the temptation to gloat, to rub it in, to remind them exactly who they underestimated, it was real. She fantasized about walking back into that office, dressed sharply, letting her heels click across the tile while Pam's face blanched. But then she'd remember the rage. The humiliation. The tears she didn't let fall in HR. And she'd remind herself that revenge isn't about the moment they suffer. It's about the moment you no longer care. Still, Karma needed a little help now and then. Harper began doing freelance IT work for small local clinics, quiet businesses with real people who appreciated her experience. Her name began circulating in the right circles. She was discreet, reliable, and thorough. Every new client, every new success, became a step away from that toxic workplace and the identity they tried to define her by. But the past didn't stay quiet for long. 2 months later, Harper received a call. Not from Pam. Not from the owners. But from the parent company that partially funded the medical supply firm where she had once worked. Apparently, they'd conducted a full audit following the system crash. The damage was deeper than they thought: lost data, breached contracts, expired licenses, and one particular email trail between Pam and HR that outlined a deliberate plan to fabricate charges against Harper. It was enough to warrant a formal investigation. And suddenly, Harper was a star witness. At first, she hesitated. She had moved on, hadn't she? She wasn't angry anymore. But when the investigator laid it out, how Pam had documented her intent to clean house, how Harper's firing was a necessary checkbox before her nephew's promotion could be finalized, something inside Harper stirred. Not revenge. Responsibility. She owed it to every colleague who had been discarded, every friend replaced by someone with a familiar last name and an empty resume. So she cooperated. Provided emails. Documents. Even the time-stamped server logs that proved her version of events. The investigator was stunned by her thoroughness. "Did you anticipate legal fallout?" he asked. "No," Harper said simply. "I anticipated cowardice." The investigation resulted in a full purge of the executive leadership at the company. Not just Pam, but both owners were forced to sell their majority stake. Their reputations? Unrecoverable. Industry circles whispered about the collapse, and though Harper never once publicly spoke about it, everyone knew the truth. It wasn't a malicious attack. It was the absence of the one person holding everything together. Harper declined press interviews. She didn't post a single word about it on social media. She let the silence speak for her. And it roared. Months passed. One rainy afternoon, as Harper sat in her favorite cafe, laptop open, earbuds in, coding for a new client, an unfamiliar voice interrupted her focus. "Harper?" She looked up. It was Victor, the VP of sales. He looked older, tired, but grateful. "I just wanted to say," he hesitated. "You were right. About all of it." Harper smiled softly. "Thanks, Vic. I should have spoken up more. When they called you in, I knew it was fake. I should have said something." She waved him off. "It's over now." "Yeah. But if you ever need a recommendation, or support, or anything, you've got it." He left her with a nod and a business card. On the back, he'd written a simple message in ink. "You saved us more than they'll ever admit." Harper slipped it into her laptop sleeve and got back to work. Another job. Another client. Another step forward. She never needed to scream. She just let their empire crumble under the weight of their own ego. And she never looked back. There was a moment, 3 months after Harper's firing, when Pam realized she had underestimated the wrong woman. It wasn't during the system crash, though that had nearly cost her job. It wasn't even during the corporate audit that unseated her cozy arrangement with the company owners. No, Pam realized it as she sat across from her attorney, hands shaking, reading the letter from corporate legal. "You are under investigation for deliberate workplace misconduct, nepotistic hiring violations, and falsifying disciplinary actions for personal gain." That was the sentence that broke her. She had fired Harper thinking she was disposable. She believed that Harper was just another IT manager, replaceable, forgettable, bound to crawl back begging for relevance. But Harper didn't crawl. She built. As Pam's career disintegrated, Harper was thriving. Word had gotten out about the quiet consultant who never badmouthed her old company but could single-handedly rebuild an entire infrastructure without breaking a sweat. Clinics, pharmacies, even small hospital networks began reaching out. They weren't just hiring Harper, they were trusting her. She was asked to speak at a regional healthcare tech summit. Her topic? What happens when infrastructure is an afterthought? She almost turned it down. She didn't want the spotlight. Didn't want to rehash the mess that had nearly destroyed her. But her mentor, an old professor from her university days, called her out over lunch. "Harper, you survived the worst of it. You know how many women in tech don't get the chance to speak truth to power?" So Harper took the stage. She didn't name names. Didn't point fingers. But every word she spoke painted a picture so vivid, so exacting, that industry professionals connected the dots instantly. the fallout rippled. Former employees from the company began reaching out, thanking her for speaking up. Some admitted they had been blacklisted after Pam forced them out. Others shared stories of being replaced by friends of friends with no credentials. The truth surfaced, not as a scream, but as a series of undeniable waves. And Harper? She began building her own consultancy. Not as a side gig. As a business. Langley Infrastructure Solutions. It started with one assistant, Tasha, the former logistics lead who had kept Harper informed. Then came a part-time junior tech. Then a full-time project manager. She picked her team with care. No nepotism. No backroom promises. Just competence, ethics, and loyalty. Each contract she signed felt like a line drawn between who she had been and who she had become. Meanwhile, Pam's world shrank. After being quietly pushed out, she attempted to find work elsewhere. But healthcare tech was a small community. And while no one openly said she was blacklisted, interviews grew shorter, colder. Her name was tied to disaster, and her resume couldn't survive the scrutiny. She filed a defamation suit against the company's parent board, claiming her downfall was orchestrated. It was thrown out in under a month. And Tyler? He drifted. Word was he never finished his degree. He tried launching a tech startup with seed money from a cousin, but it crashed within a year. Apparently, his idea of innovation was an app that orders Band-Aids when you bleed. Harper didn't waste time gloating. She was too busy leading training seminars for Real IT professionals. Too busy reviewing security protocols for her new corporate clients. Too busy reclaiming every piece of dignity that Pam had tried to erase. One day, she got a message on LinkedIn. It was from someone with the last name of one of the former company owners. A niece, maybe. The message was short. Hi Harper. I was told to reach out to you. My family is trying to rebuild. They know what happened was wrong. They're asking if you'd consider a consulting contract to help get the business back on its feet. Harper stared at the message for a long time. She considered it. She could charge double. Triple. She could walk back in and watch the desperation behind every handshake. She could set every term, rewrite every policy, remind every executive that she was the one they discarded. But she didn't reply. She archived the message. And she closed her laptop. There was a cost to underestimating Harper Langley. But she wasn't the one who had to pay it. It had been a year since Harper Langley was fired. 12 months. 52 weeks. 365 days. And not a single one had passed without someone else feeling the echo of the decision that ended her tenure and, ironically, began her legacy. Harper sat in the glass office of her own company now, a place she built, brick by metaphorical brick, using the same tenacity that got her through one of the worst chapters of her professional life. Langley Infrastructure Solutions had grown faster than even she anticipated. The first quarter had been modest. But by Q4, she had contracts with 5 medical networks, 2 private surgical centers, and a government-adjacent procurement agency. Her clients trusted her not just because she was skilled, but because her reputation preceded her in silence. She never had to tell the story. Others told it for her. The woman who got fired and walked away without a word. The IT specialist who let the company implode under the weight of its own stupidity. The consultant who proved that you don't have to burn bridges when the other side is already on fire. Her revenge had never been loud. It had been surgical. Untraceable. Permanent. One crisp fall morning, Harper received an envelope. No return address. Just her name, handwritten in calligraphy. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery. Dear Harper. There are things I've done that I can't take back. Decisions that were not only unethical but cruel. You didn't deserve what happened. I've lost everything, my job, my credibility, and most of my network. But I did it to myself. If you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I'd be grateful. Pam. Harper folded the letter neatly. No fury rose up in her chest. No fire. Just stillness. Forgiveness? It wasn't that she didn't believe in it. But Pam hadn't reached out to make amends. She was trying to relieve herself of guilt, not restore what she broke. Harper didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. She placed the letter into a small box of mementos at the back of her office closet, a place she kept not out of sentimentality, but out of remembrance. Because every time she walked into a boardroom, every time a CEO leaned in and asked, "What's your strategy for protecting our infrastructure?" she didn't just see a client. She saw herself, a year ago, in that HR office, watching her career be discarded like old hardware. And she knew what her silence was worth. 1 week later, Victor, now an executive consultant for a different firm, invited her to speak at a closed-door leadership summit for rising women in tech. He didn't mention Pam. He didn't need to. They both understood what Harper represented now. Harper stood in front of 20 bright, sharp, ambitious women. Some of them looked like her 10 years ago, hopeful, eager, unaware of the storms waiting in certain boardrooms. She didn't tell them to fight fire with fire. She told them how to build a firewall. Sometimes, she said, the most powerful thing you can do is survive with your integrity intact. Not because they deserve your silence, but because you deserve your peace. After the talk, one of the women approached her. "I've heard of you," she said, eyes wide with admiration. "They said you destroyed a company without saying a word." Harper smiled. "No," she replied, her voice even. "I just stopped protecting them from themselves." That night, Harper walked through the city with a quiet kind of pride. She passed the office building where she once worked. The windows were dark. A leasing sign hung near the entrance. The company didn't survive the year. No big announcement. No press coverage. Just an empty shell, hollowed out by arrogance and misjudgment. And Harper? She walked past without stopping. Because her victory wasn't in their failure. It was in her freedom. Her voice wasn't a roar of revenge. It was the calm, commanding silence that followed. And it was louder than any apology ever could be.